Most of the people I have spoken with over the course of this ministry, and I am talking about sincere, practicing, rosary-praying Catholics, have been holding the answer to one of the deepest questions in Catholic spirituality in their hands for years. And not one of them knew it. Not a vague answer, not a general spiritual principle that requires years of theological study before it can be applied to ordinary life. A specific, color-coded, visually precise map of the soul's relationship with God, with Our Lady, with the mysteries of salvation, and with the global mission of the Church, encoded into the 5 colors of the rosary beads that have been hanging on Catholic walls, wrapped around Catholic hands, and pressed against Catholic lips for centuries. The colors are not decorative. They were never decorative. And here is what I need you to understand before I say another word, because this is the thing that troubles me most when I look at the state of Catholic formation in the Western world today. We have so thoroughly stripped the meaning from the colors that most people praying the rosary right now are praying it at a fraction of its intended depth. Not because they are praying it wrongly, not because their intention is deficient, because they have been handed the instrument without the key that unlocks what the instrument is actually saying. And I know this because I have been in those conversations. I have sat with families, with individuals, with people who have prayed the rosary faithfully for 30 and 40 years. And I have asked them a simple question about what the colors mean, and the room goes quiet. Not because they are unintelligent, because no one ever told them. There is something else I need you to understand, and I want to connect it to the work I do, because this connection is one that most people discussing the rosary's colors have never made. The rosary is not merely a devotional prayer. It is a weapon. The Church has said this explicitly. St. Louis de Montfort said it. The saints who witnessed the most dramatic spiritual victories in the history of the Church, Lepanto, the conversion of entire nations, the protection of souls under the most intense demonic pressure I can describe from personal ministerial experience, said it. And a weapon whose components are not understood by the person wielding it is a weapon being used at a fraction of its capacity. I want to give you the full capacity. Today, I want to walk you through the 5 colors with the depth they deserve, drawing from the liturgical tradition, from the theology of the mysteries, from the World Mission Rosary of Archbishop Fulton Sheen, from the specific warnings I have carried from this ministry about what it means to pray without understanding what you are praying, and from the particular urgency of this moment in which the Church finds itself. Stay with me through all of it, because what I am going to share is not information you will find in most contemporary Catholic formation. It is older than most of what passes for Catholic formation today. It is more precise, and it has consequences, real, practical, spiritually significant consequences for the quality of every rosary you pray from this day forward. What the rosary actually is. Before I get to the 5 colors, I need to establish something that I believe the contemporary Church has largely forgotten, because the colors only make full sense within a proper understanding of what the rosary is at its theological foundation. And I find that when I explain this, even to people who have been praying the rosary for decades, something shifts, something opens. They look at the beads in their hands differently. The rosary is the Psalter of the Virgin. This designation, given to it by the Church and by the tradition of Marian devotion across centuries, is not a pious metaphor. The original rosary, in its full 150 Hail Mary form, mirrors the 150 Psalms of the Old Testament. The Church prays the Psalms as the prayer of Christ, the prayer of the whole body of the redeemed, speaking to the Father through the Son. The Rosary prays the Ave Maria as the prayer of the whole body of the redeemed, addressed to the Mother of God. 150 invocations corresponding to the 150 movements of the Davidic Psalter, structured around the contemplation of the mysteries of salvation. This structural parallel is not coincidental. It is theologically intentional, and it means that the Rosary, properly understood and properly prayed, is not a simple, repetitive devotion for people who cannot handle more sophisticated prayer. It is the complete meditation on the mystery of salvation, incarnation, redemption, glorification, structured around the one human person who was most perfectly present to every stage of that mystery. I want you to hear what I am saying, because I think most people have been condescending about the Rosary without realizing it. They think of it as the simple prayer. The prayer for grandmothers and children. The prayer for people who haven't the intellectual formation for something more demanding. That is not what the Rosary is. That is what we have reduced it to. And the reduction is one of the most spiritually costly errors in contemporary Catholic practice. The colors of the Rosary beads, their specific liturgical and spiritual significance, are one of the primary instruments by which the tradition encoded this deep theological content into a physical object accessible to every Catholic, regardless of theological education. The colors are the tradition's way of saying, this is not merely a string of beads. Each color is a key to the mystery it marks. Each color opens a dimension of meaning that bare repetition of the prayers alone does not access. And when the colors are understood, when the person holding the Rosary knows what each color represents, what spiritual territory it maps, what interior movement it is designed to produce in the soul that prays with it, the Rosary becomes what the tradition always intended it to be: not a devotional habit, a complete encounter with the mystery of salvation, color by color, mystery by mystery, moving the soul through the full arc of what God has done and is doing in Christ through Mary. The first color, white, purity, new beginning, and the glorious mysteries. White is the color the tradition has most consistently associated with the Rosary, and it is the color whose meaning I have watched most persistently reduced to a single devotional association. Wedding rosaries, First Communion rosaries, the Rosary for a New Beginning, without the full depth of what white actually means in the liturgical and theological tradition being transmitted to the person holding it. Let me take you into that depth, because it is extraordinary. And I want you to understand that what I'm about to describe is not my creative interpretation. It is what the tradition has taught for 20 centuries. White in the Catholic liturgical tradition is not merely the color of purity in the moral sense. It is the color of transfiguration. It is the color Christ's garments became on the mountain of the transfiguration, when the divinity that was always present but always veiled broke through the surface of the humanity he had assumed and became visible to Peter, James, and John in a way that knocked them to the ground. It is the color of the resurrection appearances, where the angel at the empty tomb is described in white, that is itself a theological statement about what has just occurred. Not decoration, declaration. It is the color of the final state of the redeemed, described in the book of Revelation as white garments given to those who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. White is the color of a reality that has been transformed from the inside by contact with the divine. Not merely cleaned, transfigured, made luminous by participation in a light that comes from elsewhere. In the Rosary tradition, white or crystal beads are most commonly associated with the glorious mysteries: the resurrection, the ascension, the descent of the Holy Spirit, the Assumption of Our Lady, the coronation of Our Lady in heaven. And the correspondence is precise in a way that goes beyond aesthetic choice. The glorious mysteries are the mysteries of transfiguration. They are the mysteries of what happens when the death that the sorrowful mysteries contemplate becomes the life that the glorious mysteries reveal. They are, and I want to use language here that I use in the context of the 3 stages of the spiritual life, they are the mysteries of the soul's final destination in the divine life. When you hold white rosary beads and pray the glorious mysteries, you are holding the color of your destination. You are holding the color of what you are being made into, slowly, through the sustained encounter with these mysteries. You are holding the color of the garment that the tradition promises will be yours if you allow the grace of these mysteries to do what they are designed to do in your soul. Now, here is what my work in spiritual warfare adds to this, that the purely devotional account of white does not capture. And I want to be precise about this because it comes from the pattern I have observed across many cases in this ministry. White is the color that the enemy finds most resistant to his operations, not because of any magical property of the color itself. I want to be very clear about that. But because what white represents, the soul that has been genuinely transformed by contact with the resurrection, the soul that is genuinely oriented toward its glorious destination, is a soul whose interior environment is suffused with the light that the darkness cannot comprehend and cannot overcome. When I encounter souls that are living in that genuine orientation toward the glorious mysteries, toward the resurrection, toward the eschatological destination that white represents, the demonic opposition I observe in those cases is qualitatively different. It is not weaker in itself, but it has much less to work with. The person who prays the glorious mysteries with genuine interior engagement, with the real contemplative attention that the tradition describes as the substance of rosary prayer, is a person who is regularly, deliberately, consciously orienting their soul toward the eschatological reality that the enemy wants them to forget is available. White is the color of that orientation. And the rosary that is white, or crystal, or pearl, that rosary is not merely a devotional object. It is a constant visual reminder of where the soul is going and what it is becoming. Pray the glorious mysteries with white beads. And as you pray, let the color do what the tradition intended it to do. Remind you of the transfiguration, of the resurrection, of the garment being prepared for you, of the destination that everything else in the spiritual life is ordered toward. The second color, red, the blood, the spirit, and the sorrowful mysteries. Red is the color that carries the most intense spiritual weight in the rosary tradition. And I want to say something about it that I rarely get the opportunity to say plainly in other contexts. In my work as an exorcist and deliverance minister, there is no more consistent and more operationally powerful invocation than the blood of Christ. Not as a devotional reference, as a spiritual reality with what I can only call tactical significance in the context of confronting demonic influence. The exorcism rites of the Church return to the blood of Christ repeatedly, deliberately, urgently. And that urgency is rooted in exactly what the color red represents in the rosary tradition. Red in the Catholic tradition is simultaneously the color of the Holy Spirit and the color of the Passion. This simultaneity is not a contradiction. It is one of the deepest theological statements in the entire symbolic language of the Church. The connection between the Holy Spirit and red is rooted in the tradition of Pentecost, the tongues of fire that descended on the assembled disciples in the upper room, filling them with the Spirit, transforming them from frightened men hiding behind locked doors into martyrs willing to die for what they had witnessed. Fire is red. The Holy Spirit, described as fire, is represented as red. And the martyrs who bore witness to the resurrection at the cost of their blood are honored in the Church's liturgy with red vestments at their feasts. Red because they poured out the red of their blood in testimony to the one whose blood poured out in red on Calvary. Red is the color of total gift, of the gift that holds nothing back, of the love that does not stop at the comfortable threshold. In the rosary tradition, red beads are most commonly associated with the sorrowful mysteries, the agony in the garden, the scourging at the pillar, the crowning with thorns, the carrying of the cross, the crucifixion. And the correspondence is theologically precise. The sorrowful mysteries are the mysteries of the total gift. They are the mysteries in which the love that was always present becomes visible in the most extreme form available to it, the form of the one who could have stopped it and chose not to, the form of the love that descends into the deepest darkness, not to escape it, but to redeem it from within. When you hold red beads and pray the sorrowful mysteries, you're holding the color of Calvary. You're holding the color of the blood that the tradition teaches is the precise substance of your redemption. Not a symbol of it, not a metaphor for it, but the actual price paid for the actual freedom of your actual soul. You are holding the color of the love that did not flinch. Let me tell you what I have witnessed in the context of this ministry, because it is directly relevant. The Passion was not merely a historical event. It was the most decisive spiritual battle in the history of the cosmos. And the blood of Christ, the red that the sorrowful mysteries contemplate, that the red beads represent, is, in my direct ministerial experience, the most potent spiritual force available to a Catholic soul under demonic attack. I have watched what happens when a soul that is genuinely living in the redemption purchased by that blood encounters demonic opposition. The opposition has nothing to work with. The blood of Christ is not a slogan in that moment. It is a reality, and the enemy knows exactly what it cost him. Red rosary beads held with this awareness are not merely beautiful. They are a declaration. They are the soul saying, I am held by the blood that was poured out for me. I am covered by what Calvary accomplished, and everything that the enemy sends against me runs up against that reality first. Pray the sorrowful mysteries with red beads, and let the color do what it was designed to do. Remind you of the blood, of the price, of the love that held nothing back and that holds you now with the same completeness with which it poured itself out on the cross. The third color, gold or yellow, the joy of the Incarnation and the morning light of Asia. Gold or yellow is the color the tradition associates with the joyful mysteries, and it is also, in the specific theology of the World Mission Rosary that Archbishop Fulton Sheen gave his life to developing, the color that represents Asia, described as the morning light of the East. I want to spend time on this convergence because it is one of the most theologically rich convergences in the entire symbolic architecture of the Rosary. And I believe that understanding it changes the way you pray the joyful mysteries permanently. Gold, in the Catholic tradition, is the color of divine glory, of the light that surrounds the presence of God in sacred art, of the halo of the saints, of the tabernacle where Christ reserves himself, of the vestments worn on the great feasts of the Lord. Gold is the color of glory made visible, of the divine radiance breaking through the surface of the visible world in a way that the eye can register even when it cannot fully comprehend what it is seeing. Yellow, in the liturgical tradition, and particularly in the theology of Archbishop Sheen's World Mission Rosary, is the color of the morning light, of the sun rising in the east, of the first light that breaks the darkness of the night. And this is not merely poetic imagery. It is a theological statement rooted in one of the oldest and most consistent themes of the entire liturgical tradition, that Christ is the Sun of justice, the light rising from the east, the one whose coming breaks the night of sin and death and brings the morning of salvation. The joyful mysteries contemplate the beginning of that morning, the Annunciation, the moment when the eternal Word consented to become flesh, when the morning of the divine Son began its descent into the night of human history. The Visitation, what I consider the first missionary journey of the incarnate Christ, carried in his mother's womb to the house of Elizabeth. The first encounter in human history in which the physical presence of Christ produced immediate, specific, palpable spiritual joy. The child in Elizabeth's womb leaping at the proximity of the one who had just become incarnate. The Nativity, the morning breaking, the light appearing in the darkness that did not comprehend it. Gold and yellow are the colors of that morning, of the joy that the darkness cannot comprehend because it cannot believe that the light it is encountering is real, is permanent, is stronger than everything the darkness has assembled against it. And Archbishop Sheen's assignment of yellow to Asia in the World Mission Rosary is a specific theological and missiological statement that I find extraordinarily moving. The billions of souls in Asia, in China, in India, in the nations of Southeast Asia, in the countries where Christianity is a minority, and in some cases a persecuted minority, those souls represent the largest population of human beings on earth who have not yet fully received the morning light of the gospel. When I pray the joyful mysteries with yellow or gold beads, I am consciously connecting the joy of the Incarnation, the original morning breaking over Bethlehem, with the missionary urgency of the Church's continued movement eastward. This is what the World Mission Rosary does that a purely personal rosary does not. It stretches the contemplation of the mysteries across the entire globe. It makes every prayer of every mystery a prayer for the specific continent and the specific people represented by the color in your hand. The joyful mysteries become not merely personal meditation on the joy of the Incarnation, but intercession for every soul in Asia for whom that joy is still waiting to arrive. Pray the joyful mysteries with gold or yellow beads. Let the color remind you of the morning, of the first light of the Incarnation breaking the night of a world without God, of the billions of souls in the East who are waiting for that morning to reach them. And pray with the awareness that your rosary, your specific beads, your specific prayer, your specific intercession is connected to that global dawn. The fourth color, purple, penance, the luminous mysteries, and the great preparation. Purple is the color the tradition has carried longest and protected most carefully, and it is the color whose contemporary loss from serious Catholic formation I find most alarming, in terms of what it signals about the spiritual condition of the Western Church in our moment. I want to say something about this that I believe needs to be said directly. The disappearance of a serious theology of penance from ordinary Catholic formation is not a minor pastoral adjustment. It is a catastrophic loss. And the loss of what purple represents, the interior preparation, the clearing of the soul, the sustained discipline of the seasons of penance, is directly related to what I see in the ministry I do. The cases that come to me most consistently involve souls that have no experience of genuine penance. Not dramatic sin only, souls that have simply never been formed in the interior discipline that penance requires. And without that formation, they are extraordinarily vulnerable. Purple is the liturgical color of Lent and Advent, the two great seasons of preparation in which the Church deliberately slows down, turns inward, confronts the distance between where the soul actually is and where God is actually calling it to be, and engages in the specific disciplines, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, that the tradition identifies as the instruments of genuine interior conversion, not external compliance, not the performance of penance, the interior reality of a soul that is actively, deliberately clearing the ground for the encounter that is coming. Purple in the ancient world was the color of royalty, of the royal court, of proximity to the king, of the one who carried the king's authority. And the tradition's adoption of purple for the seasons of penance is a specific theological statement about the kind of preparation that proximity to the King of Kings requires. You do not come before the king in the disordered state that daily life in a fallen world accumulates. You prepare, you clear, you discipline the soul toward the encounter it is about to have. Lent prepares for Easter. Advent prepares for Christmas. Both are purple because both are the preparation of a soul that is about to come face to face with the most significant arrivals in the history of the cosmos, the resurrection and the incarnation, and that needs the time and the discipline of the purple season to become capable of genuinely receiving what is coming, rather than merely attending what is happening. In the Rosary tradition, purple beads are associated with penance and reflection, with Lenten and Advent prayer, and in some traditions with the luminous mysteries, the mysteries given to the Church by St. John Paul II in 2002, contemplating the public ministry of Christ, the baptism in the Jordan, the wedding at Cana, the proclamation of the kingdom, the transfiguration, the institution of the Eucharist. These are the mysteries of divine disclosure, the moments in Christ's public ministry at which who he actually is breaks through the surface of what he appears to be and becomes visible to those who have eyes to see it. And here is what I want you to understand from the perspective of spiritual warfare, because I think it is the most practically important thing I can say about purple and the luminous mysteries. The primary obstacle to genuine contemplation of Christ's public ministry is not ignorance of the historical facts. Every practicing Catholic knows the outline of what happened at Cana, at the Jordan, on the mountain of the Transfiguration. The obstacle is interior noise. The accumulated spiritual disorder, the unaddressed disordering of the passions, the habitual distraction of a soul that has never been subjected to the purple discipline of genuine penance. I have sat with people who have heard the story of the Transfiguration 100 times and been unmoved by it. Not because they are hard-hearted. because they have not done the purple work that would clear the interior space necessary for the transfiguration to land in them the way it is designed to land. The soul that has been through the discipline of genuine penance looks at the transfiguration and does not merely see a miracle. It sees its own destination. It sees what it is being made into. It sees the white that follows the purple. Pray the luminous mysteries with purple beads, and let the color do its work, call you to the clearing, to the preparation, to the interior penance that makes genuine encounter with the luminous Christ not merely possible, but inevitable. The fifth color, green, hope, healing, and the world mission to Africa. Green is the final color, and I want to address it with particular care because it is the color that speaks most directly to the condition of a soul that is struggling. And in my pastoral work, most of the souls I encounter are struggling in exactly the ways that green addresses. Struggling with spiritual dryness, with the sense that the faith has stopped producing the interior fruit it once produced, with the particular exhaustion of a person who has been fighting for a long time, doing the right things, receiving the sacraments, praying the Rosary, trying to live the faith, without seeing the change they have been praying for, without the consolation that would make the effort feel worthwhile, without, in the honest moment, much sense that it is working. I want to speak to that person specifically, because green is your color. And the tradition's account of what green means is not comfort in the weak sense. It is something far more substantial and far more sustaining than comfort. Green is the color of growth. Not growth in the abstract, motivational poster sense that the surrounding culture has drained of all content. Growth in the specific, biological, inexorable, unstoppable sense of the plant that pushes through concrete. The shoot emerging from what looked like dead ground. The vine extending itself toward the light regardless of what it has to push through to reach it. This growth does not ask whether the conditions are favorable. It does not require encouragement. It proceeds because it is the nature of life to proceed toward its source. The tradition's association of green with hope is rooted in exactly this image. And I want to be precise about what the tradition means by hope, because hope, in the Catholic theological sense, is not what the surrounding culture calls hope. The surrounding culture calls hope the feeling that things will probably turn out well. The tradition calls hope the specific theological virtue by which the soul holds with certainty, not feeling, certainty, the promise of its supernatural end against every evidence that the promise cannot be fulfilled. That certainty is the green of the plant growing through the concrete. It is the life asserting itself in circumstances designed to extinguish it. And it does not require the plant to feel hopeful. It requires the plant to grow. Green in the liturgical calendar is the color of ordinary time, the long stretches of the year between the great seasons, the weeks and months in which the Church does not celebrate a major solemnity, but simply continues. The green vestments of ordinary time are the Church's statement about what most of the Christian life actually looks like. Not the purple of the great preparations, not the white of the great feasts, the green of continuous, patient, unheroic, faithful growth, day by day, prayer by prayer, decade by decade of the Rosary, toward the destination that the great feasts celebrate. I want to tell you something that most homilies do not say, and that I believe needs to be said. Most of the spiritual life is green. Most of the spiritual life is ordinary time. And the soul that shows up in ordinary time, that prays the Rosary in the unremarkable middle of an ordinary week without consolation, without drama, without the felt sense of progress, is, in the tradition's understanding, practicing one of the most demanding and most beautiful forms of holiness available to a human being. Because it is the holiness that depends on nothing external. It is the plant growing through the concrete. It is the theological virtue of hope operating in exactly the conditions that test whether it is real. And in the World Mission Rosary, green is assigned to Africa, representing the forests and grasslands, the extraordinary natural abundance of a continent that has been subjected to extraordinary historical suffering, and that is, in our own moment, one of the most explosively growing regions of the Catholic Church in the entire world. The theological convergence here is something I find deeply moving. The fastest growing Catholic population on earth is in a region whose rosary color is green, the color of growth, of hope, of life asserting itself against every obstacle. The Church in Africa is not growing gently. It is growing the way the plant grows through concrete, through poverty that most Western Catholics cannot imagine, through persecution in specific regions that is as serious as anything the early Church faced, through circumstances that test, in the most extreme form available, whether the faith is real or performance. And it is growing. It is green, unstoppably, inexorably, impossibly green. When I hold green beads and pray for Africa, I am praying for the most dramatic, living demonstration of the theological virtue of hope in the contemporary world. And when I hold green beads and pray for my own healing, for the soul that is dry, for the faith that feels thin, for the prayer that is not producing the fruit it once produced, I am connecting my personal struggle to the global demonstration that the green virtue is real, that the plant grows, that the light is there even when the concrete is thick, that what looks like dead ground is not dead at all. Green is not the color of the soul that has arrived. It is the color of the soul that is still growing, that has not stopped, that will not stop, that holds the promise of the destination with the quiet, unshakable certainty of the plant that has never once doubted the light. Pray with green beads for Africa, for your own healing, for the hope that is not feeling but theological certainty, operating in the ordinary green time of your ordinary life. The World Mission Rosary, the prayer that holds the world together. I want to spend time on the World Mission Rosary specifically because I believe it is one of the most important and least known instruments of Catholic prayer and spiritual warfare available to ordinary Catholics in our moment. And because Archbishop Fulton Sheen, whose cause for canonization is open, and who I consider one of the most spiritually perceptive Catholic voices of the 20th century, gave a significant portion of his apostolic energy to developing and spreading it. The World Mission Rosary does not represent 5 arbitrary geographic regions. It represents the 5 continents as the Church has historically understood them, each with a specific color, each with a specific intention, each constituting 1 decade of each mystery as a specific intercessory prayer for a specific portion of the human race. Green for Africa, growth and the explosive hope of the fastest growing Catholic population on earth. Blue for Oceania, the vast Pacific, the islands scattered across the world's largest body of water, the communities of faith in some of the most geographically isolated places on the planet. White for Europe, the continent that received the gospel first, that produced the greatest flowering of Catholic civilization in human history, and that is now, in my assessment, the most urgent mission territory in the world. Home of the Pope, spiritually in serious crisis. Red for the Americas, the fire of faith brought by the missionaries, the enormous and vital Catholic populations of Central and South America, and this country, the United States, with all of its complicated and urgent spiritual situation. Yellow for Asia, the morning light of the East, the billions of souls who have not yet encountered the gospel in its fullness. When you pray the World Mission Rosary, you are not merely praying the rosary with colorful beads. You are praying each decade as a deliberate, specific, globally directed intercession. You are using the structure of the rosary, 5 mysteries, 5 decades, as the most comprehensive intercessory framework an ordinary Catholic possesses. Archbishop Sheen intended this to be, quite literally, the prayer that holds the world together. I take that seriously. In the context of the spiritual warfare I have spent my ministry engaging, in which the battle for souls is global, in which the forces opposed to the faith operate across every border and every continent simultaneously, the rosary that prays for every continent is a strategic instrument that the enemy cannot localize and cannot contain. He cannot fight what he cannot contain. And a prayer that is simultaneously addressed to God on behalf of Africa and Asia and Oceania and Europe and the Americas. A prayer prayed by millions of ordinary Catholics in ordinary homes on every continent is a prayer that the enemy has no strategic response to. He can suppress it in one place. He cannot suppress it everywhere at once. The World Mission Rosary, prayed by the Church in its global extent, is the prayer that covers the globe. And each of you holding a World Mission Rosary in your hand is a node in that global network, a point of prayer in a network of prayer that spans every continent and connects every Rosary-praying Catholic to every other. That is what the colors are doing. That is what they have always been doing. Not decoration, connection. Not sentiment, strategy. Why this matters now, the most dangerous warning. I want to say something now that I have been building toward throughout this entire conversation, and I want to say it with the directness the moment requires, because I am not someone who speaks for effect. I speak from what I have seen. And what I have seen in this ministry demands directness. The Church in the Western world is in a specific and serious spiritual emergency. Not a future emergency, a present one. The faith that was transmitted across 20 centuries of Catholic civilization, the faith that produced the greatest art, the most sophisticated intellectual tradition, the most comprehensive network of mercy the world has ever seen, is being abandoned in the Western world at a rate and with a comprehensiveness that I believe no previous generation has witnessed. Not primarily through persecution, through indifference, through the gradual replacement of the substance of the faith with its form, through a catechesis that produces people who identify as Catholic and cannot explain what the Rosary is, cannot name the mysteries, cannot tell you what the colors mean or why they matter, or what the World Mission Rosary is, or why Archbishop Fulton Sheen gave his life to spreading it. The 5 colors of the Rosary are not a curiosity. They are not a historical footnote. They are one of the primary instruments by which the tradition encoded the full depth of Catholic prayer into a form accessible to every Catholic, regardless of theological education. And the failure to transmit what the colors mean is not a minor devotional lacuna. It is a symptom of the broader failure of Catholic formation that has left a generation of Catholics holding the Rosary without the key to what they are holding. What I am warning about is not the colors themselves. It is the pattern that the loss of the colors represents. The systematic stripping of substance from the forms of Catholic devotion, leaving a church that performs the practices of the faith without inhabiting their depth, that goes through the motions without receiving the grace that the motions were designed to transmit. I see the consequences of this pattern in the cases that come to me. The souls that arrive spiritually depleted, spiritually confused, spiritually vulnerable in ways they cannot explain, and whose history, when I trace it back, consistently includes years of practicing a faith that had been stripped of its depth until it could no longer sustain them. A rosary prayed without understanding what the mysteries are, without contemplating their content, without the interior engagement that transforms repetition into prayer, that rosary still has value. The intention of the person praying it counts for much. But a rosary prayed with full understanding, with genuine contemplation of the mysteries, with the color-coded awareness of the global church's intercession woven into every decade, that rosary is operating at the full capacity it was designed for. And in a moment when the church desperately needs its members operating at full spiritual capacity, when the battle for souls is as intense as I have ever seen it in my ministry, the difference between a half-understood rosary and a fully understood one is not trivial. It is exactly the difference the enemy wants to maintain. What has been taken from you? I want to name something plainly that I believe most Catholics watching this have felt without having the language to articulate it. And I want to name it not to produce grief, but to produce clarity. Because clarity about what has been lost is the beginning of recovering what was taken. Something has been taken from you. Not by malice necessarily, not by a conspiracy, by the slow erosion of transmission, the failure of one generation after another to pass forward the full depth of what they received, until what reaches the current generation is the form without the substance, the practice without the key, the rosary without the color's meaning. You were given the beads. You were not given the theology of the beads. You were given the prayers. You were not given the map that the prayers trace. You were given the devotion without the depth. And the consequence, and I see this consequence in pastoral work, is exactly what you would expect from a person who has been given an extraordinary instrument without instruction for using it. They use it poorly. They lose interest. They put it down. The rosary that is understood at the level of the 5 colors, the white of the glorious mysteries and the transfigured soul, the red of the sorrowful mysteries and the blood that redeems, the gold of the joyful mysteries and the morning light breaking over Asia, the purple of the luminous mysteries and the penance that prepares for encounter, the green of hope and healing and the church of Africa growing through concrete. That rosary is not something the informed Catholic wants to put down. It is something they want to pick up every day, because every day it is showing them something new, because every color is opening a door in the mystery it represents, because every decade is connecting their private prayer to the global prayer of a church that spans every continent and every century. That is the rosary you were made to pray, and it was taken from you, quietly, gradually, without announcement, in the space of a few generations of diminished transmission. I am giving it back. Today, in this conversation. Take it. It belongs to you. What to do? 5 practical steps beginning tonight. I want to close with what is specific and actionable, because everything I have said is useless if it remains in the realm of information. The first thing, obtain a World Mission Rosary. They are available through Catholic mission organizations, through Franciscan mission associates, through parishes that have maintained the tradition Archbishop Sheen established. Hold it. Look at the 5 colors. Connect each color to what I have described. Green for Africa and hope. Blue for Oceania and the vastness of the Church's reach. White for Europe and the urgent call to renewal. Red for the Americas and the fire of missionary faith. Yellow for Asia and the morning light still breaking over billions of souls who have not yet seen it. Pray 1 decade for each continent. Pray it as intercession, as global communion, as the prayer that holds the world together. The second thing, match your rosary to the mysteries you intend to pray. White or crystal for the glorious mysteries. Red for the sorrowful, gold or yellow for the joyful, purple for the luminous. This is not superstition. I want to be very clear about that, because I am someone who takes superstition seriously as a spiritual error. This is the tradition's color-coded contemplative map applied to your physical prayer. Use it deliberately. The third thing, learn the mysteries, not merely their names, their theological content, their specific spiritual significance, their place in the complete arc of salvation that the Rosary traces from the Annunciation to the coronation of Our Lady. A mystery contemplated without knowledge of its content cannot produce the interior transformation it is designed to produce. Know what you are holding. The fourth thing, pray the Rosary with your family tonight, with the full 5 mysteries, with the color-coded awareness of what each mystery means and what each color represents. Teach your children what the colors mean. Give them the key you were not given. Do not let the transmission fail again in your household. The pattern stops here. The depth is recovered here, in your home, tonight. The fifth thing, pray for Africa. Pray for Asia. Pray for Oceania. Pray for Europe. Pray for the Americas. The next time you hold your green bead and pray the Our Father that opens a decade, direct it explicitly toward Africa, toward the explosive growth of the church there, toward the martyrs and the missionaries, toward the families kneeling with their own rosaries in circumstances you cannot imagine. The prayer that crosses continents is the prayer that the enemy cannot localize. He cannot fight what he cannot contain. The 5 colors: white, red, gold, purple, green. Transfiguration, redemption, joy, preparation, hope. The glorious, the sorrowful, the joyful, the luminous. Europe, the Americas, Asia, Africa, Oceania. The complete map of the soul's journey and the Church's mission, encoded in 5 colors in the object you have already been holding. You have been holding the answer for years. Now you know what it means. Pick up your rosary. Begin.